A subtle vibration swept through the decks of the Vanguard as it began its controlled drop through Nix 7's upper atmosphere. Clouds thickened around them, swirling in majestic patterns tinged with a faint green hue. As the vessel broke through these layers, glimpses of the planet's surface emerged. Towering mountains stretched toward the hazy sky. Their peaks were dusted with silver and appeared etched against the strange atmospheric color. Vast forests shimmered beneath the daylight, a luscious green reminiscent of Earth's temperate rainforests, though dotted with unfamiliar flora whose leaves caught the light in iridescent patterns. Between these peaks and forests lay tranquil lakes, mirror-smooth, reflecting the atmospheric swirl like liquid emeralds. Lena Carter pressed her face closer to the reinforced viewport, eyes wide with wonder. Those lakes. Spectroscopy picks up traces of common elements, but also a faint sign of an unidentified compound. It's as if the water itself is infused with something, possibly an alien microbe. Adrian, steady at the helm, glanced briefly toward Lena. We'll proceed with caution. We have protocols for unknown contaminants. Dr. Miradas's attention was snapped away from her archival texts to the window, where she took in the unfamiliar geography. This is a dream, Adrian, she breathed. I can't believe we might finally learn what befell the colony after all these years. Lieutenant Daniel cross-tapped through final diagnostic routines. The thrusters purred in response, adjusting the craft's trajectory until it found a stable plateau. There, crumbling structures reminiscent of centuries-old architecture rose from the forest edge, vines spilling over them like protective veils. Setting down, came Jacob's crisp voice. With a soft jolt, the landing gears touched the ground. For an instant, a hush blanketed the ship as everyone allowed themselves a moment of gratitude, and perhaps apprehension, over what lay beyond the airlock. In the cargo bay, air hissed around the edges of their suits as each crew member donned helmets outfitted with contamination filters. They carried scanning equipment, weapons set to stun, and a sense of profound responsibility. Opening the hatch, Lieutenant Cross announced. The metallic groan of the outer door parted the sterile safety of the Vanguard from the raw, unexplored realm of Nix 7. A rush of crisp, cool air swirled inside. As they stepped out, they felt an immediate sense of alien hush, like stepping into a vast cathedral of nature. The ruins before them loomed in ghostly silence. Shattered columns, half-collapsed domes, and twisted metal beams jutted from the earth. Some of the structures appeared Earth-like in design, a testament to the original settlers' attempts to replicate home. Yet creeping vines with delicate silvery leaves had grown over the walls, weaving the remains into the planet's ecosystem. Spread out, Adrian ordered gently, and be cautious. We don't know what dangers or wonders might lie within. They advanced into the remains of what might once have been a central courtyard, the structure partially open to the skies overhead. Piles of rubble were draped with thick moss, and alien birds, small, scaled creatures with shimmering feathers, took flight at the sight of these foreign intruders. Dr. Miradas crouched before a marble-like plaque. Its etched letters were faded by centuries of wind and rain. Carefully, she brushed away the dust and read aloud. Nova Haven Colony, established in the year 2224 by Captain Lienzo. Her voice quivered with barely contained excitement. It's real. This is the place. Lieutenant Cross approached a half-buried building that appeared to be a former administrative hub. He took out a compact power generator, attaching cables to corroded terminals. If these systems are even remotely intact, we might glean data from their old archives. Everyone keep an eye out. There could be structural instability. In a swirl of dust, a lone door parted, leading them into a cavernous chamber. Daylight spilled through cracks in the ceiling. Broken monitors and consoles lay scattered about. Some surfaces were covered in faintly luminescent moss, giving the room an eerie, dreamlike quality. Jacob Miles joined Cross, helping sift through the ancient electronics. This is more advanced than I expected for a centuries-old outpost, Jacob murmured. I see Earth-based circuit boards, but also something else. These inscriptions aren't in any Earth language I recognize. Mira, shining a flashlight across the shattered screens, added, this might be some form of alien script. Perhaps the colonists developed it, or adopted it, to communicate with a local species. A beep from Cross's device announced a successful power hookup. With a flicker and a low hum, one of the battered consoles revived. The screen glowed weakly, and lines of text scrolled across in a mix of Earth Standard and some cryptic symbols. Distress signals recorded, Cross read, but they're partially corrupted. Let me see if I can retrieve a final transmission. A jumbled audio file crackled forth. This is Last Stand. Nova Haven. They came. The arrival is happening. Must integrate or perish. The transmission dissolved into static. Incredible, Mira said softly, her heart pounding. So something arrived that forced them to integrate or face extinction. Adrian Holt, who had been scanning the area methodically, frowned at the cryptic message. We've seen colonists adapt to alien worlds before, but never heard it described quite like that. Integration suggests a deeper union than mere cooperation. Let's keep moving. They continued through the rubble, discovering offices cluttered with old books, mold-ridden chairs, and disintegrating plastic crates. In one room, Dr. Lena Carter found a small trove of digital logs, carefully sealed in a vacuum container. Captain, I have what might be personal diaries or scientific journals. They've been preserved from atmospheric damage. She cradled them with reverence, as though each file was a link in an unbroken chain of human resilience. The day wore on, and the crew set up a temporary base within the old administrative complex. As dusk descended, Nix 7's sky took on an iridescent glow, the setting star bathing the planet in shifting blues and purples. A gentle wind carried the scents of alien flowers and mosses, giving the air an otherworldly, almost enchanting quality. They were not alone. As the final light of day faded, shadows flickered at the edge of the ruins. At first, the crew felt that prickling sensation of being watched. The scanners detected faint life signs, but the readings fluctuated as if the watchers possessed some kind of cloaking or camouflage. With his weapon set to stun, Adrian approached the edge of the courtyard. "We mean you no harm," he called out in a steady voice, echoing across the vine-laden rubble. "We come in peace, seeking the fate of our fellow humans who once lived here." A faint shimmer manifested a short distance away, revealing figures that were distinctly humanoid, yet subtly alien. Their forms were lithe, skin-toned in pale colors that glinted with ephemeral light. Their eyes seemed to glow from within, possessing an amber luminescence that was both arresting and disconcerting. A woman stepped forward, her voice resonant and melodic. "Welcome to Nix 7, she said. "I am Lyra, historian of the Nixian-Human Alliance." Her words, though spoken with an alien lilt, were clearly in Earth Standard, reminiscent of an ancient dialect. The crew exchanged startled glances. Dr. Mira Das stepped forward, wonder evident on her face. "Alliance? So the humans and your people integrated centuries ago?" Lyra inclined her head. "Yes. In those days, we were simply Nixians, and the humans called this place Nova Haven. Over time, the boundaries vanished. We became one. Our unity forged new bonds and new identities." Though her tone was welcoming, there was a hush behind her words, a story untold, of hardship and transformation that had spanned generations. That evening, the crew gathered around a makeshift campfire with Lyra and a few of her companions. The moonless sky twinkled overhead, and the group exchanged questions and stories, bridging centuries of separation. Lyra spoke of the early days. "When your colony arrived, they struggled. Our world's pathogens took many of them. Food was scarce, and attempts at farming often failed. We, the Nixians, were an ancient species dwelling in remote enclaves. At first, we watched from a distance. Our biology is quite different, you see, but we recognized your plight." Captain Adrian leaned forward, enthralled. "And so your people intervened?" "Yes. We shared medicine, knowledge of the land. But our interaction was not without tension. Some humans saw us as saviors, while others feared contamination of their heritage. Yet as disease and famine spread, we established deeper ties. Eventually, our scientists and your doctors found a way to merge our genetics. To survive, many humans took Nixian traits into their bodies." Dr. Lena Carter's eyes widened. "That kind of hybridization is revolutionary. The science to do so, where did it come from?" "We had practiced forms of symbiotic adaptation for ages," Lyra replied. "But combining it with human DNA was precarious. Over time, New generations were born with traits bridging the two species, stronger immune systems, the Nixian glow. We are the product of that union. In the flickering firelight, Lyra raised her arm. Beneath her skin, faint phosphorescence traced her veins, illuminating them in gentle pulses. We have become something else, Nixian human. Their explanation gave the crew much to ponder. The scale of this integration was unprecedented in known human history. Yet the result, sitting right before them, proved that survival had taken a remarkable turn. The following days saw a cautious but steady camaraderie form between the Vanguard crew and the Nixian human community. The once-lost colony had expanded beyond the ruins into hidden valleys and underground chambers of exquisite beauty. In one such subterranean enclave, luminous crystals protruded from the walls, bathing the corridors in ethereal glow. There, Adrian and Dr. Miradas observed statues etched with strange glyphs, a combined language of archaic Earth Standard and Nixian script. Scenes depicted the blending of two races, the exchange of knowledge, and the forging of a new society. It reminds me of the great symbolic art we saw in ancient Earth cultures, Mira mused. Yet these images are not about war or conquest, but about merging and unity. Fascinating. Lyra guided them deeper into the enclave, where thick vines dripped with azure sap, an important resource for their community. The glow of the place was reminiscent of Earth's deep-sea bioluminescence, adapted here for the subterranean environment. Your colony. Adrian paused, scanning one of the statues depicting a child with Nixian eyes. They became something far beyond what Earth would ever expect. And now, after centuries, we have come to find you. Lyra's expression flickered with an emotion Adrian couldn't quite decipher. Hope, perhaps, or uncertainty. We are grateful that you came, yet we fear what this may mean. There are those among us who believe re-establishing contact with Earth could upend our way of life. Others believe it is our right to reclaim our human heritage. Dr. Lena Carter placed a reassuring hand on Lyra's shoulder. We'll respect your choices. Our presence here need not disrupt your society. We only seek to learn, to reconnect. Yet even as she spoke, the ground gave a faint tremor, and a deep rumble echoed through the subterranean corridors, rattling crystalline formations. Lyra's amber eyes widened in alarm. That's from the outer region, the territory near Vale. She sighed, tension seizing her posture. They must be testing their new weapons. Alarms were raised throughout the Nixian human enclaves. Vale was not a name the Vanguard crew recognized from any Earth records, but it soon became clear that this rival group had become a menacing presence in recent years. The Vale, so Lyra explained, were a technologically formidable offshoot from another star system. They had arrived on Nix 7 only a few generations ago. Rumors held that they viewed the Nixian human hybrids as an abomination, an unnatural union that offended Vale's strict principles of genetic purity. When the Vale first came, said Lyra, guiding the crew to a place overlooking a rocky plateau in the daylight, they were only explorers. But once they learned of our nature, tension brewed. Now, their hostility grows. They want our resources, and some say they wish to annihilate our blended race. Captain Adrian Holt nodded gravely. We must understand their capabilities. If they threaten you, we can't stand idly by. It's not just about war, Lyra insisted. It's about survival, again. We can't retreat to being hidden enclaves forever. Adrian conferred with his senior staff. Lieutenant Cross, Jacob Miles, scanned for energy signatures that might correspond to Vale outposts or weapon systems. Lena, Mira, gather all data on Vale biology, technology, or culture from the colony's archives. We need to know what we're dealing with. In the days that followed, the crew painstakingly pieced together information, aided by Nixian human archivists. They learned that Vale was a militant culture that prized uniformity. Their spacecraft, sleek and dark, were rumored to patrol the upper atmosphere, though the Vanguard had not encountered them on approach. Perhaps the Vale were stationed on a continent across the planet, or possibly entrenched in orbit around a neighboring moon. Several nights after these revelations, the tension snapped. A deep roar echoed from the skies, and arcs of brilliant light slashed through the atmosphere. The Vale had fired a barrage of plasma bursts into a mountain pass near the Nixian human territory, likely a show of force or a calculated threat. Captain Adrian Holt, along with Lyra, scrambled to mobilize. They took a smaller scout vessel from the Vanguard, scanning the region above the planet's surface. Sure enough, Veil crafts hovered in the stratosphere, bristling with weaponry. "This is worse than we feared," Adrian announced to the crew via comms. "They've deployed an entire blockade. They might strike at any moment." In a hastily convened council, the Nixian human elders, including Lyra, gathered under a great natural dome lined with luminescent crystal. The Vanguard crew joined them, standing in quiet respect along the edges. Elder Soren, an imposing figure whose skin shimmered in deep violets, addressed the assembly. "For generations, we have sought harmony on Nix 7, but now the Veil's threat looms. The arrival of Earth's descendants, bearing advanced technology of their own, changes the balance. Should we hide, or should we stand?" A younger council member, Talia, who had inherited a strong dose of Nixian glow, pleaded for caution. "War would risk everything we've built. Is there no negotiation with Veil? Perhaps they can be convinced we are not a threat to them." Dr. Mira Das stepped forward. "On Earth, we've learned that many conflicts arise from misunderstandings. Could we not attempt diplomacy first?" Captain Adrian's lips were set in a determined line. "I fully agree that negotiation is preferable to outright battle, but we must prepare to defend ourselves. The Veil have advanced weaponry, from what we can tell. We can't assume they'll respond peacefully." Elder Soren nodded, gazing at the Earth crew with measured gratitude. "We do not wish to drag you into our conflict." Adrian raised a hand gently. "You're our kin, too, in a way. Our mission was to find lost humans, and we found something more remarkable. We can't abandon you to face a hostile force alone." After much deliberation, the Council reached consensus. They would extend a diplomatic overture to the Veil, but concurrently bolster their defenses. The Nixian human population would seek refuge in fortified enclaves, while the Vanguard prepared to stand guard if negotiations failed. Captain Adrian Holt, Dr. Lena Carter, and Lyra boarded a Nixian human vessel, hastily modified with some of the Vanguard's sensor arrays, to attempt contact with the Veil ships. Rising through the planetary atmosphere, the craft soon found itself dwarfed by the ominous silhouettes of Veil warships. Adrian's voice was calm, yet firm over the wideband frequency. "This is Captain Adrian Holt of the United Earth Space Federation, accompanied by representatives of Nix 7's Indigenous Alliance. We request peaceful dialogue." For several tense moments, static reigned. Then a voice, rasping and cold, replied. "We are Commander Tauren of the Veil. You claim representation of Earth and the planet's half-breeds. State your intentions." A flicker of anger touched Lyra's face at the slur, but she maintained composure. Dr. Lena Carter spoke calmly into the calm. "We intend no harm. We wish to establish diplomatic ties, or at the very least, ensure non-aggression. There is no need for further hostility." A moment later, the Veil flagship powered thrusters, adopting a menacing angle. Commander Tauren's voice crackled once more. "That abominable union beneath your feet is a corruption of natural design. We have no place for half-breed species. Yet we are not savages. We are willing to grant you safe passage off this world if you leave the hybrids to their fate." A cold fury rippled through Adrian. He answered in a measured tone. "That is not an option." The Veil responded with a volley of plasma charges deliberately aimed near the Nixian human craft, forcing Adrian to engage in evasive maneuvers. Then silence. No more words. As they retreated to the planet's surface, the envoys' hearts were heavy. Negotiations had failed before they had truly begun. Back in the subterranean enclaves, the sense of dread was palpable. Through the advanced sensor arrays rigged by Lieutenant Cross, they detected Veil battleships assuming strategic positions in low orbit. The Veil intended a full invasion or bombardment. The Vanguard's weapons, while formidable, were designed primarily for exploration and self-defense, not large-scale warfare. Still, Adrian and his crew resolved to stand with the Nixian humans. The Alliance began forging improvised defenses, building on Nixian technology that utilized the planet's crystalline formations to create shield-like barriers. "We can amplify the crystal's resonance field," Jacob explained to a team of Nixian human technicians. "If we link them with the Vanguard's generator, we might project a protective barrier across a wide region." Lyra's eyes lit with renewed hope. "We've only used these crystals for healing and illumination. That they might serve to shield us from energy weapons is extraordinary. Days rolled into nights as the joint efforts continued. Dr. Lena Carter and her Nixian counterparts developed medical protocols to handle potential casualties, mixing Earth-based treatments with Nixian regenerative techniques. Dr. Mira Das contributed historical insights from Earth's archives on defensive tactics. Each step reinforced the notion that this was not simply a lost colony. It was a vibrant, evolving civilization worthy of defending. Then, on the eve of their final preparations, a chilling broadcast flooded the planet's communication frequencies. Commander Torren's voice boomed. Half-breeds of Nix, 7, you have one day to abandon your enclaves and submit to Veil authority. Failure to comply will be met with annihilation. There will be no further warning. Elder Soren and Lyra addressed the panicked populace, urging unity and calm. Adrian and his crew stood beside them. Earth and Nix, 7 joined in a single purpose. At dawn, the assault began. Veil warships streaked across the sky, unleashing beams of concentrated plasma. The planet trembled as blasts scorched the ground, ripping through forests and turning mountain rock to slag. But the new shield network, powered by the Vanguard's reactors and channeled through the luminous crystals, whirred into action. A radiant dome, shimmering with all the colors of the aurora, enveloped the Nixian human enclaves. Several Veil blasts dissipated against it, sending showers of sparks into the air. On the Vanguard's bridge, Captain Adrian barked orders for targeted countermeasures. Their pulse cannons flared to life, striking Veil craft that ventured too near. Meanwhile, the Nixian human ground forces set up smaller localized barriers to protect crucial outposts. Commander Torren's flagship descended ominously, bristling with weaponry. It unleashed a torrent of fire that hammered the main shield. For a moment, it seemed the crystalline barrier might fail as cracks of light spiderwebbed across its surface. Yet in that critical moment, Dr. Lena Carter orchestrated a surge in the generator's output, guided by the meticulous direction of Lieutenant Cross. The shield's intensity flared anew, repulsing the Veil blasts. Down below, frantic radio chatter signaled that Veil troops had attempted a ground incursion near one of the lesser-defended enclaves. Nixian human defenders, armed with energy rifles adapted from centuries of tinkering, fought back valiantly. Amid the chaos, Captain Adrian led a small strike team in the Vanguard's auxiliary craft to confront the Veil ground units directly. Dr. Mira Das insisted on accompanying him, her resolve steeled by the knowledge of what was at stake for the newly found colony. They swooped over a charred forest where Veil dropships had landed. The trees, towering spires of silver-barked growth, were ablaze. The strike team's presence quickly drew Veil soldiers into a firefight. Streams of greenish plasma hissed past them, scorching the air. Adrian, grim-faced, returned controlled bursts of stun fire, aiming to incapacitate rather than kill, if possible. But the Veil troopers were relentless. Clad in segmented, obsidian armor, they pressed forward. One advanced on Dr. Mira Das, weapon raised. She braced herself, heart hammering. Before the Veil soldier could fire, a flash of silver skin and glowing eyes intervened. It was Lyra, having rushed to the front line. With Nixian agility, she tackled the Veil soldier aside, twisting his weapon from his grasp. "Run!" Lyra shouted to Mira. "There are more incoming." Overhead, the Veil flagship roared again. Another volley rained down, but the main shield held, deflecting the worst of the energy. In the midst of the inferno, Captain Adrian spotted a squad of Veil soldiers making their way toward the shield's generator. If they took it out, all would be lost. "Cover me," he yelled, sprinting across scorched earth, weapon at the ready. Jacob Miles provided suppressing fire, while Dr. Lena Carter advanced from the flank, using medical drones to neutralize enemies with tranquilizer rounds. The skirmish raged for what felt like hours, but was likely only minutes. Finally, the Veil soldiers started to retreat, their numbers unable to breach the defenders' coordinated lines. Overhead, the Veil flagship reeled from a direct pulse cannon impact by the Vanguard. Its engines flared, and with a screech of burning metal, it rose into the sky and vanished, followed by the remaining Veil craft. A hush settled over the battlefield as the battered defenders took stock. Smoke curled from the ruins of the forest. The shield still shimmered, battered but intact. The Veil assault had been repelled, but at a cost. Hundreds of acres of forest were destroyed, and several enclaves suffered partial structural damage from the bombardment. Casualties among the Nixian humans were relatively low, thanks to the shielding system, but there were wounded in need of urgent care. In the days following, the planet's battered ecosystems began to heal, helped along by Nixian human biological knowledge. The atmosphere cleared from the lingering haze of plasma fire. Tensions ran high, though, as everyone knew the Veil might return in even greater force. Captain Adrian and Dr. Mira Das joined Lyra and Elder Soren in the Subterranean Council Hall once more. The question now was whether to send a message to Earth, requesting reinforcements. Elder Soren folded his glowing hands. If Earth's forces come, it might spark an interstellar conflict with the Veil. We don't want to become the catalyst for a greater war. But we cannot stand alone indefinitely, Talia pointed out, her youthful eyes scanning the circle. The Veil will not vanish just because we wish it. Adrian felt the weight of this decision. The entire galaxy might be drawn into hostilities if the Veil expanded their campaign against integrated species. Yet to abandon Nyx, 7 to its own fate was unthinkable. Dr. Lena Carter spoke gently. Perhaps we can contact Earth not for a fleet, but for political discourse, for mediators. The galaxy is vast, and Earth has encountered numerous species that value peace and cooperation. Mira added, the knowledge that a hybrid species can flourish might pave the way for other alliances. There are those on Earth who will champion your cause. At length, the Council agreed that a signal would be sent, an urgent plea for diplomatic support, rather than an outright call to arms. In the ensuing weeks, the Vanguard's advanced communications relay was put to use. A high-frequency message, carefully encoded, beamed across light years toward Earth. Meanwhile, the Nixian humans and the Vanguard crew worked tirelessly to reinforce defenses and rebuild what had been damaged. During this time, Dr. Lena Carter conducted a series of medical exchanges with Nixian human healers, discovering incredible properties in their symbiotic biology. Bones that knit together in half the normal time. Wounds that sealed without infection. The secret lay in that first integration, centuries ago, a perfect synergy between Earth-human genetics and Nixian traits. Dr. Mira Das delved into diaries and logs from the original Nova Haven settlers. She wept upon reading accounts of famine and plague, the heartbreak of burying loved ones on a distant planet. Yet hope pervaded those records too. Hope that the children might live in a world that was safer, even if it meant becoming something more than human. At night, Captain Adrian Holt found himself drawn to the vantage points overlooking the planet's lakes. The watery surfaces, shimmering under the alien moonlight, reflected the stars that had guided him here. He contemplated how this mission had already changed him. He had come to find answers about a lost colony, but instead discovered a new branch of humanity. Captain, a soft voice interrupted his reverie. It was Lyra, her luminous eyes catching his. Lyra, he greeted. Couldn't sleep either? She settled beside him, the two of them gazing over the calm waters. When I look at the sky, I imagine Earth and the possibilities that might unfold for our people if we reconnect. But I also fear what might be lost. Adrian gently placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Change is inevitable. The question is whether it brings growth or destruction. We'll do our utmost to protect you, and to ensure that any contact with Earth respects your autonomy. You deserve that choice. Their silhouettes reflected in the water, merging into one shape. In that reflection lay a symbol of the future. Humanity, whether Earthborn or Nixian human, standing together under distant stars. Eventually, Earth answered. The message that flickered across the Vanguard's console was fragmentary, but hopeful. A diplomatic envoy, along with representatives from an interstellar council of allied species, would journey to Nyx 7. Their aim, to offer protection and to broker an agreement with the Veil, if possible. While preparations were made for this momentous event, life on Nyx 7 found a tentative new rhythm. The enclaves rebuilt more robust structures, using knowledge gleaned from the Vanguard's engineers. Agriculture expanded, incorporating Earth seeds that thrived under hybrid horticultural methods. Soon, the hush of the atmosphere was punctured by the arrival of an Earth Council vessel, the Aurora's Dawn, escorted by smaller ships from allied species. Thin, spindly crafts that seemed to ride waves of gravitational distortion. Captain Adrian Holt, Lyra, Elder Soren, and Dr. Miradas greeted the newcomers on a newly cleared landing field just outside the largest enclave. Flags from Earth, the Nixian Human Alliance, and various interstellar cooperatives fluttered in the gentle breeze. Stepping from the ship was Ambassador Raul Vega, a dignified man of imposing stature, flanked by representatives of two other species, slender, silver-skinned beings with elongated limbs, and short, broad-shouldered creatures covered in quills. Each offered gestures of greeting. The reunion was poignant. For centuries, Earth had no knowledge of what happened here. Now, confronted with the thriving but endangered union of Nixians and humans, the ambassador pledged solidarity. But the Veil were not idle. Angered by the presence of an interstellar envoy, they mustered a new fleet. Reports came in that a Veil armada was massing on the edge of Nix 7 star system. This time, however, the Nixian human people were not alone. The Aurora's dawn carried advanced diplomatic channels as well as formidable defensive capabilities. Earth's allied species dispatched their own warships, if necessary, to deter open aggression. Negotiations began in orbit, where Veil and allied ambassadors met via holographic conference. Tensions flared. Commander Tauren, his visage severe, repeated his condemnation of the bastardized hybrids. Yet the allied forces stood firm. "We respect the sovereignty of each sentient species," Ambassador Vega said, gaze unwavering. "The Nixian humans pose no threat to you. Their existence is their own. Any act of aggression will be met with collective defense." For days, the negotiations teetered at the brink of conflict. The Veil demanded that the hybrids be quarantined or forcibly relocated, citing their own cultural and biological concerns. The Allied envoys refused, presenting reasons grounded in galactic law and moral principle. Captain Adrian Holt found himself in numerous private dialogues with Veil representatives, attempting to convey the sincerity of Nixian human desires for peaceful coexistence. Yet each effort encountered the same resistance. Eventually, word spread that a faction of the Veil leadership was willing to consider a truce, if only to avoid a war with multiple species that could devastate their resources. Commander Tauren, driven by pride, was reluctant, but the political tide among the Veil was shifting. A grand summit convened, this time on neutral ground, aboard a massive space station established in orbit around Nix 7 by the Allied forces. Representatives from the Nixian humans, Earth, allied species, and the Veil assembled in an ornate conference chamber with sweeping views of the planet below. Lyra and Elder Soren stood, representing their people's centuries of perseverance. Ambassador Vega led the Earth contingent, while Captain Adrian and Dr. Miradas observed from the sidelines, ready to counsel their new friends. Holographic projections detailed the proposed treaty, which recognized the Nixian Human Alliance as a sovereign entity. It offered trade agreements, non-aggression pacts, and opened the door for cultural exchange, if the Veil would lay aside their ideological hostility. Silence weighed on the chamber. Commander Tauren, flanked by grim-faced Veil officers, strode forward to the center. With an audible hiss of the respirator tubes in his ornate helmet, he studied the treaty. His voice was coarse when he spoke. "The Veil do not easily yield. But we are not blind. We see that the galaxy frowns on us if we choose violence without cause. Perhaps we are not ready to accept the abomination your kind represents, but we will abide by this truce for now." A cautious sigh of relief rippled through the assembly. No one dared celebrate too openly, for they knew that prejudice did not vanish overnight. Yet it was the first step. In the days that followed, the tension began to thaw, if only slightly. The Veil vessels receded from Nix 7's orbit, and a formal agreement was signed, a tenuous peace. A small diplomatic Veil contingent even visited the planet's surface, escorted by allied mediators, to witness the reality of the Nixian human civilization. In the months after the treaty, life on Nix 7 took on a renewed optimism. Earth's envoys established a permanent outpost near the Vanguard's landing site. The Nixian humans, guided by the new generation's curiosity, formed committees to explore cultural and technological exchanges with both Earth and friendly species in the galactic community. Dr. Lena Carter continued her research into the extraordinary genetics of the Nixian humans, hoping that lessons learned could benefit all humankind. Diseases that once seemed intractable might now find cures through this symbiosis. Dr. Mira Das compiled an extensive historical anthology, weaving the testimonies of original diaries with modern accounts to create a comprehensive record of the lost colony's evolution. She found in it a testament to resilience and cooperation spanning centuries. Lieutenant Daniel Cross oversaw the upgrading of Nix-7's infrastructure, improved power grids, reliable communication arrays, and a structured approach to resource harvesting that respected the planet's fragile ecosystems. As for Captain Adrian Holt, he met regularly with Lyra, now a leading figure in bridging the gap between Earth and Nix-7. Their friendship deepened, carrying an undercurrent of shared dreams and unspoken mutual respect. Both had dedicated their lives to exploration and the hope of unity across worlds. The question lingered: would the Nixian humans ever choose to visit Earth en masse? Some yearned to see the original homeworld of their ancestors. Others felt a tug of unease, not wanting to abandon the planet that had nurtured them for generations. A planet that had tested them, nearly broken them, but ultimately allowed them to transcend their origins. Spring arrived on Nix-7, if one could call it spring, for the planet's axial tilt and orbital period created seasons unlike Earth's. The forests near the enclaves burst into bloom with translucent flowers, their petals refracting sunlight into subtle rainbows. Lakes glittered under the renewed warmth, and creatures of the wild emerged from hidden dens. Amid this rejuvenation, an Earth shuttle descended from orbit, loaded with visiting scientists, cultural ambassadors, and even a small number of curious civilians who had volunteered for a cultural exchange. During one of the welcoming ceremonies, an elder musician among the Nixian humans played a haunting melody on a hybrid instrument, part Earth violin, part Nixian crystalline resonator. The assembled crowd, both Earthborn and Nixian human, listened in breathless admiration as the notes seemed to weave centuries of history into the air. A new chapter was opening, not just for this planet, but for the wider tapestry of sentient life in the galaxy. The boundaries between alien and human blurred in the shared notes of that music. Some, however, questioned whether the differences would truly be honored as integration with the galactic community deepened. Would the uniqueness of Nix-7 eventually be assimilated into the broader swirl of interstellar civilization? Or would it stand as a beacon, an example of how synergy and respect could birth wonders anew? Time passed. The call for a more permanent presence of Earth authorities on Nix-7 grew louder. Some suggested that the planet be admitted into the United Earth Federation, granting it representation. Others believed Nix-7 should retain complete independence, forging alliances on its own terms. The leading voices of Nix-7 gathered in a great amphitheater built around the skeleton of an ancient colony ship's hull, a fitting symbol of the past melding with the present. Captain Adrian Holt, Ambassador Raul Vega, and the Allied representatives sat as observers, leaving the decision to the Nixian humans themselves. Elder Soren opened the floor. "We have come far. We survived the merging of species, endured the threat of extinction, and discovered new friends among the stars. Yet our identity is our own." Lyra addressed the crowd next. "The unity we have forged includes respect for our heritage, both human and Nixian. We do not need to reject one to embrace the other. Let us choose a path that affirms our place in the galaxy without losing what makes us distinct." Over several sessions, spirited debates erupted. Some advocated for the immediate advantages of joining Earth's Federation, trade, protection, and a say in galactic matters. Others feared an erosion of cultural uniqueness and an intrusion of external political agendas. Ultimately, a consensus emerged, a middle path. Nix-7 would maintain its sovereignty, recognized by Earth and allied species, but it would form a special mutual defense and cultural treaty with Earth, ensuring that neither party would stand alone against future threats. They would share knowledge, uphold mutual respect, and foster the growth of each other's cultures. In a symbolic gesture, Elder Soren placed his hand upon a carved replica of the old Nova Haven plaque, while Dr. Mira Das placed her hand upon an ancient Nixian emblem. Together, they raised these symbols of heritage and unity before the cheering assembly. "If you wish a happy ending, In the following months and years, Nix-7 thrived beyond all expectations. The Veil, bound by the treaty and cautiously influenced by shifting opinions within their own ranks, kept a wary peace. Earth's ambassadors rotated regularly, sharing technology but respecting Nix-7's cultural integrity. The children of Nix-7 grew up learning not only about their mixed heritage but about the wonders of the galaxy, stars where humans once originated, and worlds inhabited by myriad other life forms. For the first time, they realized their place was not just a lonely outpost, but a vital, growing entity in an interconnected cosmos. Captain Adrian Holt, his mission complete, chose to remain on Nix-7 as Earth's official liaison, finding a sense of belonging in the shining eyes and open hearts of those he once set out to save. His friendship with Lyra deepened, blossoming into a partnership that transcended cultural lines. Dr. Lena Carter, revered for her pioneering medical discoveries, saw her research flourish, her work on Nixian genetic symbiosis revolutionizing treatments back on Earth and beyond. Dr. Mira Das penned comprehensive histories of the colony, hailed as an interstellar classic, a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of humankind in concert with alien allies. Standing beneath the planet's twin moons, the Nixian humans looked upward, no longer seeing darkness and isolation, but the promise of bright, endless possibilities. Their story became a new legend in the annals of galactic history, a lost colony reborn through integration and a testament to Unity's power. And so, under starlight that whispered of ancient journeys, Nix-7 emerged as a beacon of hope, a thriving world shaped by the legacy of two species who proved that together they could carve a future more luminous than either alone. In the months following the treaty, it became clear that resentments and prejudices lingered. While the galaxy's diplomats had secured a tentative truce, bitterness smoldered in certain Veil factions. Earth's presence on Nix-7, perceived as meddling, only fueled that resentment. One cold morning, without warning, a rogue Veil warship pierced the planet's atmosphere. Ignoring all diplomatic protocols, it unleashed a devastating bombardment on the largest Nixian human enclave. The shield, still under repair after prior skirmishes, could not withstand the surprise assault. Fire rained upon the peaceful settlement. Buildings crumbled, crystalline structures shattered, and thousands perished in an instant. Captain Adrian Holt, racing to power up the Vanguard's defenses, could only watch in horror as the city he had come to cherish fell into ruin. In the aftermath, the Veil vessel vanished into the darkness of space, leaving behind a wounded planet and a shattered people. Earth's reinforcements arrived too late. A deep melancholy settled across Nix-7, its luminous forests and shimmering lakes now scarred by ash and ruin. Lyra, gravely wounded in the attack, spent her final hours in Adrian's arms, her glowing eyes dimming. "Do not let this unity die," she whispered. But though her plea resonated with those who survived, the flame of hope flickered weakly amidst the devastation. In time, Nix-7 would rebuild, but the innocence of a shared future was lost. Instead of a triumphant rejoining with Earth, the planet entered a new era of fear and suspicion. Diplomats labored to mend relations and prevent a larger war, but no treaties could bring back those who had fallen, nor erase the trauma etched into every survivor's heart. Thus, the tale of the lost colony found anew ended not in harmonious unification, but in tragedy. The Nixian humans learned a bitter lesson, that the cosmos could be as cruel as it was vast, and that the spark of integration and hope, once extinguished, was not easily rekindled.